You're listening to the Build Your Business podcast, powered by Turnkey Coach, where we help business owners find freedom over fear.
I'm Matt Reynolds.
And I'm his brother, Chris Reynolds.
Join us as we help build your business and move from fear to freedom together. You're listening to another episode of the Build Your Business podcast, where we take you from fear to freedom. We really walk through the things that make business owners anxious and hopefully take away some of that anxiety. We are your co-hosts, Matt and Chris Reynolds. We're brothers. We both have about 20 years of business experience each, so almost 40 years of business experience between us. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
We're going to talk about something that we hear all the time, which is the question of, am I ready to hire my first employee? Or how do I know when it's time to hire? I'm a business owner of one, and I need to become a business of two.
Yep.
Which is usually what happens. It usually doesn't go from 1 to 5. Occasionally it does, but most of the time it's 1 to 2. And so I think the thing I want to spend the bulk of the time on this episode, and as we get through, once you've hired that person, we'll do additional episodes on how to onboard them, how to make sure they fit into company culture, all those sorts of things. Some of those company culture things should be things when you hire them. You're hiring not just on their skill set, but for culture. But What I want to do first is answer that question, am I ready?
Yep.
And so when I started to think about whether I was ready, and you and I talked about this a little bit in the show notes ahead of time, so jump in at any point, I am trying to find the best combination of, one, what the business needs and where the bottleneck is. Where am I, as the only employee, as the founder, slowing the business down? 2, what do I suck at? And/or what do I hate?
Mm-hmm.
For example, one of the first things that I hired out was payroll. I was fine at payroll. I didn't suck at payroll. I just hated it. And so I hired it out, right? And there are other things. Okay, where or what tasks are you doing as a founder or owner that's costing the company and you money that you could hire out at a cheaper wage so that you don't have to do that, so that you can focus on the things that are more valuable to the company? Is that fair?
That's exactly. Look, the reality is the things that will drive whether or not you decide or who the right person is to hire first.
Yep.
Definitely.
So typically, most of the time, you're going to hire a lower wage, and it's not always the case that it's a lower wage position, so that you can do the things that are most valuable. Now, no matter whether it's a low wage, let's say a $20 an hour job or a $100 an hour job, one of the things you have to make sure, and you can look at previous episodes, is just you're financially ready to hire. So, maybe go into that. How many months of runway, if you've added this salaried person on, or hourly wage person, or even a contractor on, should you make sure you're in a good spot that you say, not only do I have a bottleneck, not only am I doing things that I suck at or hate, not only am I doing things that's costing the company money, but if I bring them on and the business doesn't grow for the first 3 to 4 months, and by the way, this will slow you down when you hire your first employee. It's not like they're off and running the first week. There's a lot of training and onboarding, and again, we'll get to that in a future episode. How do I know that the finances are in a good spot where I can actually make that hire?
Yeah, I think the metric that I've always used is whatever you're committing to that employee, contractor, whoever, you need to basically have 6 months of their pay sitting there ready to go. That needs to be something that you've got, in the bank. If you want to be even more conservative, you want to feel even more comfortable, you want to sleep a little better at night, make it a year.
Sure.
But, in most businesses, especially new businesses, cash flow is the thing. And so you're probably not going to have just a giant pile of cash. The thing to remember is when you have 6 months of cash for somebody, that's not, you're not going to spend that down over time.
Right.
Theoretically, if you do this right, you should be getting cash inflows.
Additional cash inflows even from their position.
That's exactly right. So the thing to always make sure that you're thinking about here is you kind of got to model this out And we'll probably do a separate episode also on financial modeling for founders, just like early stuff that you want to be able to do. But one of the first things you'll do is, you can just plot out your expected cash flow on an Excel sheet and go, all right, here's how much comes in, here's how much goes out. And if I put their amount in there as well, it's this. But then also, by hiring this employee, it either adds additional revenue to the top line because it's freeing up some of my time and I can go get some more sales or deliver on some more contracts or whatever it is you're doing. And, and you plot that out. The great thing about doing it that way is that it gives you a very concrete set of expectations for that person that you're bringing in. And that's one thing that I would say you want to communicate early. Listen, we're going to do this 6-month trial or whatever, however you want to say it. We're going to, I can absolutely, I guarantee that for the next 6 months, I've got this. And we'll talk through what that looks like. But my expectation of you during that 6 months is that you are doing this so that I can do this other stuff, because that's what brings in the revenue that allows me to keep paying you. Right. And early, that first employee, I think you want to be on your first employee. It's probably better to be more transparent. You're going to get less transparent over time and we'll talk about why later, but less transparent around things they can't control. But employee number one can control a lot. Right. And you want to be as transparent and as brutally honest as possible. Make sure they know what they're getting into. Yep. Because if the time comes where it doesn't work out, you don't want to be in a situation where you told them, you've got this totally stable job, I've got everything taken care of, and oh, sorry, things went the way that I didn't expect it to go. You want to say, look, I don't know. I got you for 6 months. That much I know. Sure. And every month after, we can talk about how far out we are, right? Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as the business gets bigger, you hear a lot of other entrepreneurs talk about hire slow, fire fast.
Oh,
and this doesn't necessarily apply to employee number one unless you're hiring a total stranger, right? And so first, I would say that let's give some examples of what that employee number one, some of those positions might be. So for example, at the gym, I've mentioned this before, the first person that I hired was the custodian. Because it was the lowest paying job, I was cleaning the toilets. It's not that I wasn't, or that I was too good to clean the toilets. It's just, it was costing the business money to have the guy that owns the business clean the toilets. So we hired a custodian. My first employee at BarbaLogic was Nikki Sims. And that's because I'm a pretty good people person. And from a customer service standpoint, I was very careful to make sure that deep in our core values, we were a company that treated people awesome. And at some point, I was getting so many emails, customer service emails, not because something was screwing up or that we were failing, but we had hundreds and hundreds of clients and I couldn't keep up with the customer service aspect of that. And I needed somebody to help me with payroll. And we don't really like the term HR around here or in general. When I think of HR, I may have said this before too. I think of Toby from The Office. Like, I don't want that in the building. And so I hired, on the custodian side, I didn't know that person, but that is such a low risk job and a low paid job that I could take any homeless guy off the street. And if he could read the SOP, or a college kid or a high school kid, they could do it. So that was not as important. For the first position at BarbaLogic, I hired somebody I knew, somebody that was in my network that I knew had the skill set to help us be successful. So there wasn't really an intense interview process. Now when we have to hire out, and they're like, when we hired our VP of finance, leading into CFO, we did the full, gathered 250 resumes, worked through them all, did top grading, interviews. This is not that.
Yeah.
This is, here's the bottleneck, here's where I need help, and I'm going to hire a person for that help. Another one that I think is probably would be fairly common for a business that's growing quickly and that you are doing all of the work as the founder is an EA, is an executive assistant, somebody to just manage my calendar, manage my emails, do project management stuff, tell me what you need from me. We do a check-in every morning. And so I have a great EA, Dan Shell. He's fantastic. And we walk through very quickly, whether it's over the phone or whether it's a screen recording of, here's my task list today. We can go into HubSpot and see what my tasks are. And then he sends me back like basically a Roger, here are your task lists. They're in order of priority. Also, here's what's on your calendar. You're podcasting with Chris at 7 a.m. You got a meeting with Mission Control at 10 a.m. So those times are blocked out of your calendar. And so these other things will be done in the spaces between. And so that's not a super high paying job. Now, again, if you're in a massive company and you've got a big executive team, an EA is often a 6-figure plus salaried position. But for this first hire, you may just need somebody to help you get organized. And that might be somebody in your town, in where they can come into your home, work in an office in your home, go through your mail, throw away the junk mail, go fill up the truck with gas. It could be that. Dan Shell is in Ohio, and so he does all of my business, technical, anything that's on the internet. And he also helps with like show notes and does podcast administration for us. So lots of help there as well. That's another great position that really what we're doing in hiring this first position, this first employee, is you're doing the things that will free you up to do the more important things. So it really comes back down to that urgency versus importance. I'm trying to hire out the urgent so that I can focus on the important.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think it is the most common thing to hire somebody that you know as the first employee. And I have, looking back at my businesses, I have always done that. Even today, it's look, there's always a risk, right? So if you know them, you might be good friends with this person. You might part of what you're hiring for, and you just need to recognize this. Part of what you're hiring for is that you have pre-established trust. Right. And if you have pre-established trust, you are almost certainly friends of some kind, right? You have to have a relationship with this person in some way. The thing to recognize is that business has a way of tearing that apart.
Yep.
And so you need to go into it with eyes wide open about what that could mean if that happens. If you're okay with that and they're okay with that, so be it, right?
Yep.
But I think that you definitely don't want to go into it thinking, it's the relationship is going to be exactly the same way that it was before. It won't be. It can't be, actually.
Sure.
In many ways, you are now their boss. And that means, if they're not performing, you got to tell them about it. I mean, so those things are things to just keep in mind. But there are also big advantages. If you truly know them well and you understand, you already trust them and you know that their skill set is the right skill set for the thing that you need, then honestly, it removes a big portion of the risk to hiring some rando that you don't know, right? That's always a higher risk thing. So I definitely would say, as long as, be open and honest about it, make sure that you've had that conversation with them about, hey, this can very likely change the relationship. I just want you to know that. I got there's a business side of me, there's a personal side of me. It's could be a little bit different. I just want you to know. Yep. Like I said, the transparency is higher with this first role. Right. So make sure that all of those things are out on the table, part of the discussion, and that you're clear on what's going to happen. The only caveat I would put on this is, here's an early mistake that I made, and I just want to keep you from making the same mistake. And that is, don't fall into the trap that smart people that you know are particularly smart or whatever, or just people you like be cautious on this one too, right?
Sure.
That they can do any job. Like, what you want to do is think to yourself, I think this is maybe the bar that everyone has to cross whenever it comes to hiring. And it is this person who they are, like in their personality, in the way their brain works and all of those things, are they capable of becoming great at this position?
Right.
May not be great day one, but are they capable of becoming great? And maybe even, are they likely to become great? You're looking to take advantage of someone's natural propensity for greatness in a particular area of their life, right?
Right.
You wouldn't take somebody who, let's say, when you go to their house, there's just piles of mail everywhere, to come over and be your EA and help you deal with mail.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Not a good fit.
Just because they're your friend and you like them.
Yeah.
But in their personality and their skill set, there's not a high potential of success there.
Correct. And they may be the kind of person that you could trust with a secret to their grave, right?
Right.
That's great. Good. I'm glad you have that relationship. Not the kind of person to deal with your mail,
Right.
right?
That's right.
So I just think you have to be very cognizant of the reality that people are different.
Yep.
Okay. They just are. People are different. Not all people are the same. And the way that people are put together, the way they, their background experiences, the way they were raised, what they know, what they've been trained on, all these things, but particularly what they're good at and like needs to align with the thing that you are hiring them for, which very frequently is a thing that you do not like, right?
Correct. Yep.
These are the filters that you need to put
Yep.
on as you're thinking about who should I hire for this first hire? Somebody that's going to, where the odds are like 90% or higher that they're going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah,
Like,
because
that's what
if
you're looking
it's
for.
50%, then there's a 50% chance that you will not be friends at the end of this process.
And that you lost it, and that you lost a ton of time and money trying to hire somebody.
Now I have to. That's exactly right. Right. So we're hiring on skill set. Not that they have to be an expert in the skill, but they should have the skill. They should have some level of skill for the thing you're hiring for. There are times in businesses where someone is so intelligent and so good, but they're being hired for a completely new position, but the business has so much cash reserves and so many employees that they have the time to train someone up to learn the new job. That is not this, right? This is the onboarding process for this first hire should be like 2 weeks or less.
Yeah.
And they should be off and running. Now, at 2 weeks, they may not be as good as you were, but they're already taking things off your plate so that you can do the things that matter. So skill set and personality is kind of the bridge between the skill set and the other thing you're hiring for is culture fit. Are they going to be a good culture fit to this company? Can they, if, for example, I don't have any problem compartmentalizing between business Matt and friend, family, whatever Matt, right? And not every founder is that way, although I think a lot of founders lean that direction. Like, this is business, and then we can go out and, even if there's a screw up in the business, we can still go have dinner together and be fine. But employees are different, and they're all over the place. Like, they can sometimes compartmentalize, but more often than not, if you have to give them a stern talking to about something that needs to be fixed, they will internalize that and be like, Matt doesn't like me. Matt doesn't want to go have a beer with me. Matt, and that's not true at all for me, but you have to understand who you're dealing with. If you already know this person, then you also should know that or have an idea of how they're going to handle that sort of situation. And by the way, that's something I think that should be talked about in the hiring process. Like, hey, we're friends. Like, we can go to a show together. We can go, our families can go have a meal together. Even if the business day is hard, even if the business day is long, even if there's times when I've had to get onto you and say like, hey, this wasn't done well, it needs to be done better. That doesn't have an effect on our friendship. Now, at some point, sometimes an employee will try to totally screw you over, which is why you're trying to hire somebody that wouldn't and that you trust. And certainly I can look back over the years that I've owned business, and there are employees who I was like, they treated us really poorly, and I do not want to be friends with them anymore. I was 20 years ago, but I am not today, and we're not going to talk probably for the rest of our lives. So you certainly can cross a line, but if somebody makes a genuine mistake in the business, or you're training them through that, or you have to correct them and give them some sort of admonition, that doesn't mean that it affects the friendship, especially in the beginning as they're learning this process.
Yeah, all it really is, I think when you boil that down to what is the thing that would actually like ruin it, it's breaking the trust.
That's right.
So like when trust is broken between two humans, not between an employee and a boss, not between a friend and a friend.
That's right.
Once two humans no longer have trust, the trust is gone in all versions of that relationship. And
it's almost impossible to ever build back.
That's correct.
As a matter of fact, the only time I've really ever seen it being built back is like blood relation.
Yeah.
And even then, sometimes it doesn't get built back.
Yeah, it's a tough reality. But look, there are some really positive things that come out of this if you do it well. So just because you like somebody is not the reason to hire them.
Right.
Okay? Like, that's the primary thing I want to make sure people understand.
So if we check are we ready? We've got 6 months of their pay already in the bank. So we know even if the business doesn't grow, we can still make payroll, which is something that you're now making, because as As a owner, founder of one, you can just take draws off the business. You may not be getting a payroll or a salary or, it's basically how the business does that month. And maybe you take a percentage out or whatever for yourself. We've obviously got podcasts on that. So do you have that money in the bank? Where is the bottleneck in the business, right? What does the business need? What do you suck at or hate doing? What work are you doing that's costing you money because it's a lower wage job than what you should be doing? And in the end, you're trying to hire somebody that you already have trust, that has that skill set and is a good culture fit for the business, understanding going into it. I think if you have all those things, then you could say like, yeah, it's time to start looking. And here's the reality of the situation. For those of you who haven't done this yet and are thinking about it, you probably have somebody in your mind right now.
Yeah.
It's not like I have to start thinking about who my network is. I've hired many people, as I know you have, where I've gone to my team and go, we need to hire this person because they're awesome at this and we suck at this and we trust them already and we've worked with them. They own their own little business or they're a contractor or whatever. And we go, hey, it's time to make an offer to bring them on because how much can I learn from somebody? And certainly we'll go through top grading and stuff down the ways, but like from a resume and a couple interviews, you're not going to learn very much. But if you've worked with somebody for 5-10 years, you knew him for 20 years. I was a deal with Nikki Sims. She was so great at customer service. I started to get to the point where I was overwhelmed with customer service. And one in, 25 emails, be a little snarky from me. And she's like, I'm going to take over all those at this point. And I've never seen her be snarky.
Yeah.
And then the payroll, which I don't think she particularly likes either, but I allowed her to manage that and hire that out as well to another service we use TriNet now, which was Zenefits. And so anyway, so that's a good way to know that you need to hire somebody. Now, next thing. Are we talking about hiring a full-time employee, a part-time employee, or a contractor, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be really careful here because again, we're not lawyers, but here's what I know and here's what you know because we both have employees and contractors all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any international employees. We just have a few contractors, but we have employees like all over the United States. And every state has wildly different rules for employment. For example, and again, I'll use this as as an anecdote that may or may not be true because I don't want to get myself in trouble with what I'm about to say. California sucks trying to get into a contract with a 1099, which is essentially not even allowable in California anymore. You basically cannot have a 1099 in California. And they also suck with all their employee rules. Like all the stuff you have to do for California, paperwork you have to keep, hours you have to keep, making sure, even if they're on a salary job, there's all sorts of things that you have to check off the list that if you have an all hands like crisis mode and you need people to work 60, 70 hours that week, if they are upper management executive level, that can be asked of them and they just get paid their salary. But if they're not that and they don't fulfill all of the requirements, they have to keep their hours and you're paying them overtime. And then there's overtime rules about how much overtime they can work and all that stuff. So I would say, I'm not saying that Matt will never hire another employee from California. And by the way, if you're listening to this, because I do have a handful of employees from California and they're fantastic. It has nothing to do with them, nor am I considering getting rid of them because of the state they live in. I wouldn't do that. But for those of you who have not hired someone yet, especially if you don't live in California and you're looking to bring somebody on, I would look real in depth at the state. And by the way, California is not the only one. There's a handful of states. California is the worst. And so that's number one.
Yeah, I would just as a way to sort of think about this, 3 podcasts just before this podcast on AI and all the various places that AI can help you. This is a really good place to use ChatGPT deep research or one of the deep research items because all you need to do is say, this is what I need. This is what I'm needing. what should I be careful about in terms of employment type and state and
Right.
all of that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Because you can get some very clear instruction about what is real at this point in time. These things change as, state governments change and rules change and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely would echo that, like, there are states, and California is certainly one of them, where it is significantly harder to hire a 1099 contractor if that's, what you're needing to do.
Now, from a 1099 to employee, so I think most people know this, but if you don't hire a 1099, but you have a contract with a contractor who in 1099 is their tax code basically. So they fill out a W-9, I think, instead of a W-2. My suggestion would be, and be very careful, if they clearly qualify as being a contractor, I would have a contract with them.
Oh, for sure.
And that also makes this way easier on the time limit. So you just enter into a 3 to 6 month contract with them, a 6 month contract for work, not for hire, for contracted labor. And typically, in the vast majority of businesses and states, you can end that contract for any reason whatsoever. Like, they don't have to do a bad work. You could just, you don't have to have a reason to end the contract with a contractor.
Yep, that's right.
So, however, if you hire an employee, so like you're telling them what hours they have to work, they have to come to a specific location, maybe they have to wear a specific uniform or outfit or whatever, like that's an employee, right?
Yep.
And so if they're an employee, one thing that most founders don't know is that if I'm going to pay, let's just say I'm going to hire a contractor and I'm going to pay them $50,000 a year, let's say. The real cost to the company is $50,000 minus whatever little bit you have to pay for the payroll service to make sure they get paid and whatnot. But no taxes are getting taken out. You're not paying Social Security. Some states require workman's comp for 1099, so you may have some of that. If you hire an employee at $50,000 a year, then you need to understand that the cost to the company is actually going to be 1.3 to 1.5x of what you're hiring them for. And some of that's dependent upon whether they're part-time, which, by the way, states have lots of rules about part-time employees, or full-time, and the benefits that are then offered based on part-time or full-time. So you're paying a portion of their taxes, their payroll taxes, like federal taxes, income tax, Social Security, workman's comp, often insurance, often a retirement package. Now, when you're hiring your first employee, you probably don't have any of that stuff in place. And so it shouldn't matter unless ChatGPT and or preferably a tax attorney that you call up, they say, yeah, you got to give them insurance or you've got to give them this. And there are states that will do that. Just know that the cost for an employee, always for the taxes, are going to increase the cost of that employee by, I'd say on average, 20%.
Yeah.
And upwards of 50%, depending on what kind of additional benefits and packages they have.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And this is just an area where, again, we talked at the beginning about when you lay out the financial picture, and the way I've always done this is in Excel, you're going to have a column for each month, basically, figure out what the income is, figure out what your revenue is coming in, figure out what your expenses are going out, and make sure you don't miss that row that is the tax expense on their salary, right? Like, you got to get that in there. And most of the services that you will use for payroll will also estimate this for you.
Correct.
So our company uses Gusto. I've actually been very happy with Gusto. It's done a great job for us. And if you go in and put a salary number in for somebody, or you put in a contract amount for somebody or whatever, it'll do a bunch of calculations for you and say, this is the cost of the company.
Always ask for the state of residence and things like that. So it'll same thing for us for TriNet. But the key there is that if I'm going to take that employee, let's say I'm going to pay him $5,000 a month. I take 5, I multiply it by 6 months. I say, okay, I need $30,000 in the bank. Wrong. What you have to do is you have to take the $5,000 or the $30,000 and multiply it by 1.3, 1.35. So now I actually need $40,000 of money in the bank if I want 6 months to make sure that I can take care of that. Okay, so now you know if you should hire an employee. You have some general ideas of what that looks like. Let's actually talk about or finding that person or making them an employee and how to do that research. Here is how I approach it if you are doing this well and you've listened to the podcast so far, you should have a SOP for their job already because you're doing that job, right? So you should have a SOP for how I do my emails or how I do my Basecamp project management or how I clean the gym or whatever the thing is. So you already have a SOP. Then you go in based on the SOP and you write a very clear responsibilities and expectations document, which will be a contract essentially for them. That's what we call an R&E. And that R&E is going to have, it's not very long. It's usually like a couple pages long, 2 pages, let's say. And it's going to have their job title. It's going to have a summary of the role. It's going to have who their direct report is, which is going to not be very hard to understand if you're the boss and they're the only employee. But as the business grows, we always make sure they understand who are they reporting to, right? Here's the summary of the role. Here are the role-specific duties and deliverables. Like, this is what we expect from you, which includes expected output or hours. And we'll do another podcast, I'm sure. I couldn't care less about hours unless states tell me I have to. I care about output. So I just want high output, whether it takes that employee 30 hours or 100 hours. And if it takes them 100 hours, we've screwed something up and they're working way too much. But we give compensation, pay increases, promotions based on output, based on doing excellent work. It's a meritocracy. That's how you get, not because you were in the office the longest. And by the way, I think it's still a great idea. Like, dress for the part, show up early, leave late, all great things, right? And certainly that doesn't hurt. But just because you hit your 1 year anniversary or your 3 year anniversary or your 5 year anniversary doesn't mean you automatically get the pay bump.
Yeah.
The pay bump comes from the output, right? Well, that all stems from this 2-page document. That this is your job. This is what you do here, right? This is your responsibilities and expectations. Before we ever get to, I don't even have a place for them to sign it. I send it to them. If I know they're who I want to hire, when I say I send it to them, Nikki actually sends it to them. And they go over it, and they often go over it with their direct report, and they ask questions, and we often change a few of the bullet points, and we delete this one and this one, and we add a couple more. And that is the working document. That is the contract that then you have them sign. And of course, it has their pay and their benefits usually at the bottom. So pay is X amount per month, which I like doing monthly, by the way, and not annual salary, because especially for this first employee, like, we're not guaranteed to be able to do 12 months. So
right.
you're gonna get paid this much per month. Here's the benefits we're going to offer. Or at 3 months in, health insurance kicks in or whatever thing, or you're offered the 401k or the simple IRA or whatever. But the key here is that everybody actually wants this.
Yeah.
They want to know what's expected of them, number one, because they want to do a good job for you if they're going to, especially if they're going to leave their job to take this job with you. But they also should have, it should be discussed, and probably even in the R&E, although I actually like to discuss it verbally with them more face-to-face or over a Zoom call, where they have a clear plan of success and upward mobility in the company. They want to know, if you're hiring me at $2,500 a month or $3,000 a month, or what is not very good pay, 5 years from now, am I still making $3,000 a month?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Well, no, if you do this really, really well, these are the opportunities that will open up for you.
Yeah.
And so you start with the SOP, you take the SOP, and you turn that into a responsibilities and expectations document with all of those specific directives for them and the specific work for them. Discuss it with them, make sure that we're all on the same page, and then we put the signature line in and we sign, and we're good to go. And then they're officially hired.
Yeah, I think that practice is extremely good, actually. And I think that a lot of businesses don't do this. So this is a great place to, look, again, I know I'm going to be the guy that drills on this constantly, but we just did 3 episodes where we talked about AI. This is not that big of a project. Okay. Like, you can do these documents really fast with some of these tools, right? It doesn't take that much. So there's no reason not to do it, but there are a million reasons to do it.
That's right.
So make sure that as you're doing this, you will cover a lot of your managerial sins by doing this well. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, look, if this is your first employee, you're going to make some mistakes. Okay. You are.
You're going to make
right?
it with every employee, by the way. With
Oh,
every
yeah.
executive, you're going to make it with your COO. You're going to make it with your CTO, your
Yep.
CFO. You're going to make mistakes for everyone. But this one, you definitely are, because it's the first time you're
going
doing
to
it.
make the most on this one.
That's right.
And you'll hopefully not make those same mistakes with some of the others. But because of that, make sure that you're just being really clear about what the expectations are, because it is a lack of communication about the expectations that ultimately breaks down this kind of relationship, causes all the problems. So
Yep.
get clear about what this is.
Yep.
I also really like the idea that it's not you writing it and giving it to them to sign. I love this idea. I don't do this, by the way. I think it's a great idea. This is in draft form.
That's
We're
right.
going to talk about the draft form. If they have input to the draft form, they are going to have more buy-in to it.
That's right.
Right? Because they put it in there.
We literally put it in Google Docs, and we might leave the pay and the benefits out the first time they see it. Maybe we've discussed a ballpark figure, right? But we let them actually then make edits to it. So we give them suggesting, they turn on, they're not editors, but they can make suggestions to the Google Doc. So, or they can ask questions or comments or whatever, and you make those changes. Now, here's where this also is phenomenal. And I know we're getting to the end of the time, so we need to wrap this up. But you take that same R&E 6 months later, and you send it. You send the old R&E, the R&E that they had from 6 months ago. You make no changes off of it typically. You send it to them, and you say, now, tell me, based on your last 6 months of work, where are the places that you're doing work that wasn't on this R&E that needs to be added?
Yeah.
And what are the things you're not doing, right? And that should be taken away, right? Not because you're failing at your job or whatever. But we've got a working document that we can then tweak based on the amount of additional responsibility that they've taken on or whatever. We can then make the pay adjustments and start to have that conversation. And then we load that right into our payroll side, our Trinet, and you use Gusto. What are those companies called? This is
the payroll company.
It's a payroll
HR company.
It's just an HR type company, which again, I want that instead of a Toby. And that gets turned into a contract, and they sign it, and then their pay changes. So that R&E is not just great for day one. It's great we do it every 6 months, and we update those things.
Yeah.
And we update pay, and this is the time when employees also have opportunities to ask for raises, or, hey, I've taken on this additional responsibility. So, those are the times to have that negotiation, not send them, here's what the job looks like. And by the way, for people who have worked at my company, who have worked at multi-billion-dollar companies before they worked for us, those multi-billion-dollar companies never did that. They sent out, this is the job, this is the description, this is the pay, sign the contract.
Yeah.
No changes.
Yeah. I mean, look, here's the thing. One of the things that this does, if you use this process, is it keeps you in a good position to have an opportunity as an employee to have a conversation in a shorter period of time than a year, which is too long, right? So like you can't say, hey, you're signing up for this thing, we're going to talk in a year to talk about like how this thing is going. In reality, as your first employee, since that's sort of the point here, you're going to know on a daily basis, probably, because you're going to be so close to this one that it's like, but it won't always be that way. And this is a great time for you to set good practices in place if your company grows, to utilize those same practices to continue to grow. Start with good habits now and build this out going forward. I love this document. I think it's a great idea. Going to implement this.
Awesome.
I'm going to implement your R&E idea.
And I'll send you, I probably won't send anybody. I can send you one that we actually have. You could run it through AI and make it generalized.
I could make a generic one, yeah, for sure.
And then we could put it out to the listeners
that's a great
as well.
idea.
So here's another thing, really quick, one last point about the R&E. Don't make it too stiff and don't make it too flexible.
Yeah, that's right.
So I would say you want about 75 to 80% of very clear expectations and responsibilities with 20 or 25% of flex built in. And that's because for people who are either super type A or kind of OCD, which, both of us have some of those traits, or just in general have a little bit of a issue sometimes with authority or bosses. If you're in a important business meeting and you only have one employee and the business meeting is going long and you're at the conference table You need to be able to text your employee and say, hey, I need you to order DoorDash or go pick us up some food. And because we're in the middle of this meeting. And you don't want an employee that says, like, that ain't my job.
Right.
That would be a red flag. Now, also, if you're not hiring them to be an EA and you're hiring them to do a legit, HR job, payroll, stuff like that, be careful about those asks. Like, it's not their job to go get you coffee every day.
Yeah.
Like, that's not their job. But in a situation where I'm at a table making a business deal and the person I'm making the deal with has just told me they're starving or they would really love coffee. Hey, so-and-so, could you grab us some coffee or some food or whatever the thing is that's outside their job? So you build a little bit of flex in, 25% flex, 75% like very clear expectation roles.
Yep.
Especially for these early ones. So that is most of it, man. I think anything else we need to cover?
No, I think here's the thing. This topic is probably very important to most of you as you think about your businesses. It's probably the biggest decision you make is employee number one. We'll do more podcasts around these really early hires and like the some of the things to help you navigate through it. But I think this is a great start, good foundation for those of you that are thinking about bringing somebody on to really take your business to the next level.
Yep, it's really simple. You find the person that you trust, that you probably know, that has the skill set and is a good culture fit for your company, and that you're not so worried that if it goes poorly, it's going to destroy the friendship that you have. You make sure that you choose to hire someone who has a skill set at a place that you don't, that will make you better. You build out a nice SOP, which you should already have for that position. You write the R&E. You let them give feedback on the R&E. You come to terms with the R&E. This is the responsibilities and expectations. You start the discussion on the pay. They maybe have already asked, like, and I'll say it's a ballpark number because I'm not sure if you have the skill set to do like this or this or this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, the pay would be higher. And if not, then maybe replaced. And then you sign the documents and now you have an employee. And from there, the next step is how to onboard well so that they stay because we don't want turnover in our business because it's extremely expensive for businesses. So that's how you know if you need a first employee. If you do, go out there and get them, right? Follow these rules, follow this list. It's a great place to start. And that, I think that's it. And we'll follow up with onboarding and what the next steps look like to make sure that they get in. The longer your company has existed, the more culture is deeply ingrained in that company, which includes unwritten rules. Like, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to use that bathroom. I'm supposed to use this bathroom because that's not in the employee handbook, right?
Yep.
And so that takes some time to get through that stuff and to think through that onboarding process. And as technology gets more and more complicated, certainly AI helps tremendously with this, making sure that you have all the steps in place to onboard them quickly and get them those little wins, just like we've talked about in previous episodes. Little wins are huge. If they can get through that first week and you say, hey, the goal for the end of this week is to get this little win, and it's an easy win, then you can just keep building up the wins. And then what you end up with is tremendous traction of a wonderful employee. And pretty quickly, you're like, my life is so much easier because I have someone to do the stuff that I hated to do or that I suck at.
100%.
Awesome. That's another episode of the Build Your Business podcast. I'm Matt and Chris Reynolds, taking you from fear to freedom. Thank you for listening. We would love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcast. By the way, audiobook came out yesterday for Undoing Urgency. I think it's 99 cents on Audible, which I would say just pay the 99 cents and not use the credit. And if you're not on Audible, I think it's $1.99. I don't know how long that'll last. It's just, I think, a week or something. So if you've been waiting for the audiobook to come out of Undoing Urgency, I've listened to the first maybe 4 chapters just because I actually wanted to buy it and see how it worked on Audible and whatnot. Would love for you to pick up that book. Go to certain.com, SURTON.com for all your development and engineering needs, technology, AI, etc. And if you're looking for a great coach, or you are a great coach and you're looking for an excellent software, if you are a great coach, you'll go to turnkey.coach for that software. If you are a client or a busy executive, and you're like, I can only train 30 minutes a day, but I just need a professional coach somewhere that can walk me through the steps, go to barbelllogic.com. I think that's it. That's the salesies I'm going to get.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you guys next Friday.